If you're seeing these signs, wealth is already coming. You may not believe it yet, but your life is beginning to align with principles that have guided every successful man and woman across history. These signs are not always loud. They don't come with flashing lights or announcements. They come quietly, like a shift in your thinking, a calm resolve in your heart, or a subtle excitement when you wake up in the morning. You may have started to notice that you no longer envy others, that you no longer complain as much, that you've grown tired of excuses. You feel pulled towards something greater. That alone is a sign, because desire is not random. It is the blueprint your soul shows you of a life that already exists, if you're willing to move toward it. Now let me ask you a question. Have you begun to dream again? To picture yourself free from stress, working on your own terms, walking with a kind of confidence that needs no explanation? That's another sign. The vision precedes the victory. You've likely heard me say that we become what we think about, but think of what that really means. If you've begun to think of wealth not just as money but as time, health, peace, service, and abundance, then wealth is already drawing near to you. The law is this: that which we fix in our mind consistently must become our reality as long as we do not abandon it through fear. If this message resonates with you, then I invite you to like this video and subscribe, because if this is the path you are on, you will need reminders like this, not for entertainment, but for alignment. Because the greatest threat to wealth is forgetting who you are becoming. Now here's something most never realize. Wealth does not arrive because of luck. It arrives because of order. A man who organizes his thoughts, who gives his day's direction, who begins to expect improvement rather than fear decline, that man is laying down invisible tracks on which his fortune will arrive. Most people wait to see evidence before they believe, but the 5%, those who rise, believe first, then act. And because they act, they eventually see. Are you noticing that you've stopped waiting for someone to rescue you? Have you taken full ownership of your results without blame, without bitterness? That's a sign. Because the moment we stop assigning our pain to the outside world, we reclaim the keys to the inside world, and that's where all lasting wealth is formed. Perhaps lately you've grown more protective of your time. You've begun to say no more often. You no longer chase every distraction or jump at every opportunity. That's a sign. Discipline is the language of wealth. Most of the world spends their hours in reaction, scrolling, worrying, escaping. But when you begin to plan, to reflect, to say, here's what I will do today, you have already stepped into a minority whose lives begin to multiply. Remember this: wealth favors those who respect time, because time, like money, flows toward structure and meaning. If your hours have begun to take shape, so too will your future. Let's talk now about a subtle shift that almost always precedes abundance. It is the shift from comparison to inspiration. Have you found that you now admire others for what they've built instead of resenting them for it? Have you begun to study, to learn, to listen with the intent to apply? That's a sign. Because only when we stop seeing others as competition and start seeing them as evidence do we move from scarcity to expansion. The person who is inspired instead of envious will always rise faster. Why? Because their energy is directed inward toward growth rather than outward toward judgment. Now here's a truth I want you to hear and feel. Money flows toward clarity. If you've begun to define what you want, if you've written it down, carried it with you, or visualized it each morning, then wealth has already been alerted to your presence. You are no longer drifting. You are now magnetic. A clear goal gives your mind instructions. It programs your decisions. It refines your emotions. And in time, it calls out to opportunity like a beacon in the dark. Most people never write down what they want. They drift through life and call it fate. But you, if you've started to define even one goal, have already joined the creators of the world. Are you noticing more coincidences? Are you running into people or ideas that seem oddly connected to your goals? That's another sign. There is a law of alignment at work, and once we begin to walk in the direction of our vision, the path seems to respond in kind. Ideas appear, doors open, conversations change, the right book shows up. These are not random, they are signals, echoes from the future you're walking toward. But only those who are awake, aware, and expecting can recognize them. If you've started to pay attention, to take notes, to act on intuition, then you are already being guided. Let's be honest, the path to wealth begins with thought, but it matures through action. If you've started to take small steps each day, if you've committed to doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it, That is perhaps the strongest sign of all, because now you are not just wishing, you are building. The bridge between the seen and the unseen is built by consistent effort. Most people wait until motivation arrives, but wealth is drawn to those who act while afraid, while uncertain, while tired. If you've shown up regardless of how you felt, then you have already surpassed the majority. Let me leave you with this. You wouldn't be watching this if something inside you wasn't already changing. You wouldn't have listened this far if the message didn't resonate with your deeper self. So let me tell you plainly, if you've seen even 3 of these signs in your life lately, wealth is not just coming, it has already begun its journey toward you. All that remains is for you to remain steady, faithful, and clear. There's a phrase I want you to write in the comments to seal this principle in your mind and to declare that you are ready to receive. I am one with purpose and prosperity, free of fear, ready to receive. When you type those words, you anchor the thought in your being. You reinforce the truth that wealth doesn't begin outside. It begins in thought, in spirit, in discipline, and it ends in the quiet joy of a life fully lived. There is a shift that takes place in a person's life long before wealth arrives, and that shift is internal. It's subtle but unmistakable. It often begins with discomfort. You start to feel restless, not because something is wrong, but because something greater is calling you. You can't tolerate meaningless activity the way you once did. You find yourself uninterested in gossip, small talk, and complaining. You sense that your life must take on more direction. That is not burnout. That is not fatigue. That is the early pain of transformation. And make no mistake, transformation always begins with unease. The soul whispers that you are made for more, and if you ignore that whisper long enough, it will begin to shout. But if you listen, if you change, if you act, it will reward you with a life of deeper meaning and financial peace. Now let's speak plainly about one of the most misunderstood signals of incoming wealth: boredom with the ordinary. You see, when a person starts craving excellence, they can no longer stomach mediocrity. If you've felt irritated by old habits, if you've started questioning how you spend your mornings or why you're wasting energy on trivial distractions, take that as a sign. You're awakening, not to the world, but to your own power. Most people stay where it's comfortable, but the moment you begin to outgrow your comfort, the world begins to move in your favor. It is only when a person steps into discomfort voluntarily, when they seek improvement, not out of pressure but principle, that they start walking the narrow path that leads to wealth. Have you noticed your conversations changing? Have you stopped entertaining negativity? Do you now find yourself more interested in plans, visions, investments, self-improvement? That's a sign. Because wealth is a language, and before you live it, you speak it. The moment your words begin to change, your life begins to shift. People don't realize how often they curse their own progress. They say things like, "I'll never be rich," or "That's not realistic," or "People like me don't get those chances." These are not just phrases, they are spiritual locks. If you've stopped speaking that way, you've already unlocked the vault. Because wealth begins in the tongue and moves to the hands and then to the world. Let me ask you something else. Are you feeling more drawn to quiet lately? Less noise, more space? Less social media, more solitude? That's not a coincidence. Silence is the forge of wealth. It is where clarity is born, and clarity is more valuable than gold. In silence, you hear your own thinking. In silence, you realize what matters. If you've started to spend more time with your own mind, congratulations, you've left the crowd. The crowd is always talking, but the wise are always listening. You must listen before you can lead. You must get quiet before you can get rich. That is not opinion. That is law. Now perhaps you've begun waking up a little earlier. Not because someone told you to, but because you want to. That's a sacred sign. Early rising is an ancient signal of rising destiny. You see, the first hours of the day are where the powerful take control. While the world still sleeps, the successful are planning, visualizing, journaling, studying. They are building the internal world before the external world wakes up to distract them. If you've claimed even one morning for yourself, that is the first deposit in the bank of personal greatness. Don't waste it. Protect it. Nurture it. Because the sun favors those who meet it face to face, not through a screen. And how about your appetite for learning? Has it increased? Do you find yourself studying, watching, reading, not for entertainment, but for advancement? That is a pure sign. The mind that craves understanding is already preparing to manage abundance. A mind that resists learning is not ready for growth, but the one who studies daily, who applies even a single new idea, who listens and tests and refines, that person is sharpening their instrument. And when wealth comes, it will not overwhelm them. They will hold it with grace. They will multiply it. They will use it to serve and expand. The student always becomes the steward, and the steward becomes the master. Are you feeling called to clean your space, simplify your surroundings, remove clutter from your environment? That's no accident. That is spiritual preparation. Wealth cannot dwell in chaos. Order is its invitation. The simple act of organizing your home, your finances, your schedule, it may seem small, but it signals to life itself that you are ready to handle more. Energy must flow, and when your space is clear, your energy flows without obstruction. A cluttered space often reflects a cluttered mind, but a clean space sends a message. I'm ready. I'm focused. I'm responsible. If that urge has arisen in you recently, don't ignore it. It's a divine appointment with your next level. Have you become more generous? Have you started giving time, encouragement, kindness, even when it's inconvenient? Then you have touched the very essence of wealth, because money flows through those who flow. Giving is not loss. It is circulation. And when you give without fear, without strings, you declare to the universe that you already have enough. That is not arrogance, that is spiritual abundance. And spiritual abundance always precedes material abundance. The one who clings will lose. The one who releases will gain. If you've given something lately without expecting anything in return, you are richer than you think. Here is something few will tell you. Wealth does not change who you are. It amplifies what is already present. So if you've started to refine your character, if you've become more honest, more consistent, more disciplined, it means you are preparing to receive without collapsing. Integrity is the foundation that sustains fortune. Many people chase wealth with broken character, and when they get it, it destroys them. But the wise man builds the foundation first. He becomes the kind of person who can carry greatness without breaking. If that's you, wealth is not just on its way, it's been watching, waiting, and now approaching. Let me close this part with one final insight. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. So if you are becoming more focused, more grateful, more intentional, then it is no longer a matter of if wealth will arrive, but when. And the when depends only on your persistence. If anything in today's message reminded you of yourself, even in a small way, then your task is simple. Continue, deepen it, strengthen it, and declare it. In the comments, I want you to write, I am ordered, I am focused, I am ready for more. Those who declare it, live it. Those who live it, lead it. And those who lead never chase wealth. They draw it. Let us now explore one of the greatest signs that wealth is approaching your life, the shift from emotional reactivity to rational composure. Have you recently found yourself pausing before you respond? Have you chosen calm over conflict, patience over panic? That's not weakness, that's mastery. And wealth moves toward the composed. Because wealth is not attracted to chaos, it is attracted to control. A man who can manage his emotions can manage opportunity. A woman who can hold her peace under pressure can hold prosperity without being ruled by it. If your internal state has begun to stabilize, then your external world is preparing to reflect that order. This is a sign few notice, but those who master it soon notice their lives begin to align in ways that can't be explained, only experienced. Here's another clear signal. You've begun to say no. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but from a sense of clarity. You are no longer available to everything and everyone. You are beginning to protect your time, your energy, your focus. This is the gatekeeper mindset, and every wealthy individual, every truly free person, has mastered it. Most people say yes to anything that sounds urgent, but the wise understand that not every opportunity is worthy. If you have begun filtering your decisions through the question, does this serve my higher vision? Then wealth has already begun making its way to your doorstep, because now you are acting as a builder, not just a drifter. You are curating your life, and that is the very soil where fortune grows. Let's take a moment now to understand something even more personal, your relationship with failure. If you've started to see your past mistakes not as shame but as lessons, if you've begun to see failure as feedback, then you've crossed the invisible line between survival and creation. This is a signal only the few understand. The moment you stop judging yourself and begin learning from yourself, everything changes. You cannot build a wealthy life on a foundation of regret, but you can build it on wisdom, and wisdom is forged in the fire of your own experience. So if you've started reviewing your past not with guilt, but with curiosity, then congratulations. You've begun converting pain into power, and that is priceless. Perhaps lately you've begun feeling more grateful, not just for the obvious things, but for the small details. The morning light, the sound of silence, the discipline to work, the people who support you. Gratitude is a magnet. It draws more of what you're ready to appreciate. And it's no accident that those who are thankful tend to attract more to be thankful for. If you've caught yourself saying thank you without being prompted, or pausing in the middle of the day to appreciate where you are and how far you've come, then understand this: wealth is already circling your life, because you are aligned with the frequency of expansion, not depletion. You are choosing fullness, not lack, and that shift alone reshapes your future. Let me now speak to your posture in adversity. Have you faced a recent setback with courage instead of collapse? Have you been challenged lately but found a new strength rising up in you? That's a divine signal, because life will always test you before it blesses you. It must see who you are under pressure. Anyone can smile in ease, but the future belongs to those who keep walking in storms. If you've kept moving, if you've kept building even when tired, then you are passing tests few ever recognize. You are showing yourself trustworthy, and wealth is drawn to the trustworthy like a ship is drawn to safe harbor. Now let's reflect on your inner dialogue. What do you say to yourself when you're alone? If those words have started to become more empowering, more uplifting, more focused, then you are being prepared for greatness. You cannot rise externally while degrading yourself internally. The mind must become a sanctuary, not a battlefield. And when your self-talk changes, your identity changes. And when your identity changes, so does your destiny. If you've caught yourself replacing doubt with affirmation, fear with vision, or hesitation with purpose, then you are not becoming someone new. You are remembering who you've always been. This is a sign, a powerful one, and wealth has already noticed. Another subtle but profound signal: you've begun to see money not as something you chase, but something you attract through value. You now understand that money is a reflection, a reward for service, for focus, for insight. If you've stopped looking for shortcuts and instead started asking, how can I serve more? How can I give more? How can I become more? Then your mindset has entered the realm of the wealthy, because you no longer measure success by what you get, but by what you give. And that shift, when genuine, is the gateway to a different kind of life. One filled not just with cash, but with calling, and purpose, and peace. Here's a key idea. You've started to notice patterns. You see how certain habits create certain outcomes. You see that procrastination always leads to pressure, that planning leads to peace, that complaining solves nothing, but creation solves everything. That pattern recognition is not just intelligence, it is spiritual sight. And if you are now catching yourself before the bad habit begins, choosing the productive path, identifying the loop and breaking it, you have become a creator of destiny, not just a passenger in life. This is more than discipline. This is vision in action. And vision, when repeated with clarity and commitment, always becomes visible. Let's not forget the value of stillness. Have you begun to slow down, not out of laziness, but out of awareness? Have you started to breathe before decisions, to observe before reacting, to think before speaking? That's a mark of inner wealth. Because those who are still can see, the world rushes, the wise remain steady, and in that steadiness, new options appear. Wealth is not found in panic, but in perception. If you've begun to cultivate calm, even when your circumstances are not ideal, then you are walking the very path that leads to sustainable prosperity. I'll end this part with one final law, one that will clarify everything you've been sensing lately. When your inner world changes, your outer world must follow. Not might, must. The universe is ordered, not random. And when a man or woman begins to think, act, speak, and believe in alignment with wealth, wealth cannot ignore them. So if you've seen yourself in these signs, I invite you now to declare your alignment in the comments. Write, I am walking in vision. I am calm. I am already in motion. Let this be your anchor. Let it be your agreement. Because the moment you declare it with belief, it begins looking for you with speed. Let us now turn our attention to a deeper layer of wealth, one that goes beyond material possessions and speaks to the soul of true prosperity, the shift from need to sufficiency. Have you noticed lately that you're no longer obsessing over what you lack, but instead feel a growing appreciation for what you already possess? That is not complacency, that is sufficiency. And sufficiency is the foundation upon which abundance is built. When a person stops begging life for more and begins building with what they have, they move into a powerful state of creativity. This is where the wealthy dwell, not in desperation, but in stewardship. They don't ask, "Why don't I have more?" They ask, "What can I do with what I've got?" And from there, the seed multiplies. You may have started to feel strangely detached from the outcome, not apathetic, but confident. You still want the results, but you are no longer enslaved by them. That's a profound sign, because when you release the need to control everything, you make room for flow. The man who can hold his vision loosely but live his values tightly is a man who will prosper. Most people grip too tightly. They fear every delay, every dip in momentum, every unknown variable. But the moment you trust the process more than your panic, the energy shifts. Life begins to work with you, not against you. And in that harmony, doors open. This is the posture of prosperity: focused action, open hands, and deep trust. Perhaps you've recently simplified your goals. What used to be scattered across 10 ideas is now focused into one. That too is a sign. Simplicity is strength. The wealthiest people do not pursue 20 things, they master one. They say no to 1,000 things to say yes to one path, and they walk that path with clarity and intention. If you've been feeling the urge to delete, to strip away, to streamline your commitments, don't resist it. That is not you giving up. That is you sharpening your spear, and a sharp spear cuts through noise. It pierces through confusion. It hits the mark. Wealth is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters. Well, let's talk now about your relationship to risk. Have you begun to feel more courageous, more willing to move despite uncertainty? That's not recklessness, that's the sign of growing belief. Fear doesn't vanish. It is simply overruled by faith. When you start taking risks, not random gambles but calculated, intentional steps into the unknown, you are stepping into the arena where wealth is made. Because no fortune is built in safety. Every builder had to step where others refused. Every leader had to walk alone before they were followed. And every wealthy person had to face the voice of doubt and say, "I will move anyway." If you've done that lately, you are no longer hoping, you are becoming. Another signal is this: you've stopped arguing for your limitations. You no longer say, "Well, I've always been this way," or "That's just not in my nature." Instead, you've begun saying, "What if I could learn that?" or "Why not me?" This is the self-liberation phase, and it is always a precursor to breakthrough. Because the moment you stop clinging to your past self, your future self begins to emerge. You are not your history, you are your direction. And wealth favors those who move forward, not those who replay old scripts. If your inner voice has shifted from doubt to curiosity, you are already being reshaped by your next level. Now let's explore the role of routine. Have you started structuring your days with intention? Have you created non-negotiables, habits you follow no matter what? This is more than productivity. This is personal infrastructure. The moment a person installs discipline into their day, they begin channeling chaos into creation. Most people drift, but those who rise build rhythms that support their goals. They rise early. They reflect. They work. They rest with purpose. If you've started to guard your mornings, plan your evenings, or track your progress, then wealth has already taken notice. Because wealth is not a product of occasional effort, it is the reward for consistent alignment. Here's a powerful sign. You're becoming less reactive to negativity. Insults bounce off. Delays don't shake you. Critics no longer control your emotions. That's not coldness, that's internal stability. When you stop letting the external world dictate your internal state, you step into the sovereign mindset. And sovereignty is magnetic. It commands respect. It quiets noise. It attracts peace. A person who can smile in tension, who can stay focused under attack, who can stay kind without being soft. This person is being shaped for great responsibility. And great wealth always follows great responsibility. You're not just rising, you're being refined. Another sign, perhaps overlooked, is a hunger for truth. You've stopped entertaining lies, even comforting ones. You no longer want to be told that things will magically get better. You want facts, you want principles, you want real strategies, not surface-level slogans. That shift in appetite is profound because it signals that you are done with fantasy and ready for mastery. The wealthy deal in reality. They understand timing, leverage, psychology, economics. They seek understanding, not comfort. If you've started craving truth, even when it hurts, then you are preparing to wield power with maturity. And here's one final signal for today. You've begun to feel more responsible, not just for your results, but for your influence. You're thinking more about how your choices affect others, how your energy changes a room, how your work ripples beyond your own life. That's legacy thinking. And legacy thinking always precedes legacy living. The man who thinks beyond his own benefit is the man who builds empires. The woman who acts in alignment with future generations is the woman whose wealth outlives her. If your thoughts have grown wider, if your purpose has grown deeper, if your heart has grown stronger, then wealth is not just coming, it's being entrusted to you. So now I ask you to anchor today's message. In the comments below, write, "I build with purpose. I move with trust. I lead with clarity." Let this be more than a phrase, it is a declaration of your current trajectory. And if you feel it, if you know it deep down, then keep moving forward. You are already surrounded by the signs. Now it is simply your turn to act in alignment with them. There comes a moment in the journey toward wealth when a person stops asking, "How long will it take?" and begins asking, "How far can I go?" That moment marks a turning point. It is no longer about escaping struggle, it becomes about expanding your potential. If you've recently begun to think beyond bills, beyond obligations, beyond comfort, then you've touched the edge of true wealth. You've stopped living in survival mode and begun operating from creation. That's a sign, because wealth isn't just the accumulation of money, it's the unfolding of capacity. It's the realization that your ideas, your energy, your time, your faith can all be multiplied when guided by principle and vision. The person who thinks long-term, who stops obsessing over how fast and starts investing in how deep, is already experiencing the mindset of builders, owners, and legacy makers. You may have started to care less about impressing others. That shift, though subtle, is profound. It means your identity is stabilizing. You no longer buy things to be seen. You no longer post things to be praised. Instead, you're beginning to build privately, grow quietly, and move intentionally. And that is the soil where real wealth grows, because wealth that lasts is never flashy in its birth. It is quiet, deliberate, intentional. The moment you become more committed to growth than to validation, you've crossed into a new atmosphere. And in that atmosphere, things compound. Quiet confidence always becomes loud results eventually. But first, you must grow in silence. That's a sign you've already begun. Let's talk about something almost no one sees as a wealth signal: discomfort with toxic relationships. Have you recently pulled back from those who drain your energy? Have you stopped explaining yourself to people who refuse to grow? Have you let go of old circles, not out of bitterness, but because they no longer align with your vision? That's a sign. Because the wealthy are not just selective with their money, they are selective with their energy. You cannot build with everyone. You cannot share dreams with the disinterested. When your standards for relationships rise, so too does your capacity for reward. When you protect your peace, you attract power. And if you've begun walking alone more often, you're not losing, you're ascending. Another powerful indicator is the emergence of conviction. Have you started to feel strongly about certain principles even if others don't agree? Have you stopped following the crowd and instead started walking in your own direction, even when it's uncomfortable? That's a sign. Conviction precedes success. The world is full of people who float, who agree with everyone, who say what is safe. But the ones who build wealth are those who stand. Not arrogantly, but clearly. They know who they are. They know what they believe. They are not tossed by trends. And because of that, they become immovable. When your values are solidified, your results are amplified. A person with conviction is a person who can be trusted with influence, and influence always attracts opportunity. Have you noticed a surge of responsibility rising within you? Not because someone forced it on you, but because you chose it? That's a profound wealth sign. You see, money is responsibility. Leadership is responsibility. Freedom is responsibility. And the ones who rise are those who begin to say, "I'll handle it." Not with resentment, but with resolve. You've begun to show up when it's inconvenient. You've started fixing what you didn't break. You've started leading even when it wasn't your job. These are signals that you are no longer waiting for life to get better. You are becoming better for life. And the people who carry this spirit are the people who wealth finds and favors. Here's another quiet shift that means everything. You've stopped rushing. You're no longer frantic. You no longer feel the need to prove something in 30 days. That's not laziness. That's rooted confidence. You understand now that empires take time, that quality beats quantity, that seasons exist for a reason. The one who works with the season always wins over the one who fights against it. If your pace has become steady, your emotions more regulated, your mind more patient, then you are maturing into wealth. And wealth, like fruit, cannot be forced. It must be cultivated. It must be nurtured. If your spirit is settling, your future is rising. Let's speak now about creative energy. Are you finding new ideas coming to you more often? Have you begun to solve problems instead of just spotting them? That's another signal. Wealth flows to those who can create, not just consume. And creativity isn't just about art. It's about finding new solutions, imagining better systems, improving what already exists. When your mind begins to move from reaction to innovation, you are shifting from employee to leader, from dependent to designer. The future belongs to those who can imagine it first and then build what they imagine. If your ideas are growing bolder, don't dismiss them, honor them. They are the seeds of the world you're meant to build. Are you beginning to care more about impact than attention? Have you felt a stronger pull to serve, to teach, to share what you've learned? Then you're already walking in wealth. Because the wealthy think in terms of multiplication. They ask, how can I help others rise with me? And when you begin to think in this way, you unlock an energy that few understand. The energy of purpose. Purpose attracts provision. When you align your gifts with the needs of others, doors open, money flows, peace expands, and even when challenges arise, you remain anchored, because your life is no longer about consumption, but contribution. This is the wealth that cannot be taken. Here's one final idea for today. You've begun to trust yourself, not because you're perfect, but because you've proven to yourself that you will not quit. That quiet confidence, that inner knowing that is a magnet. Because the person who trusts themselves will eventually be trusted by others. And trust is the foundation of every business, every sale, every investment, every opportunity. If you believe in your word, if you follow through when no one is watching, if you do what you said you'd do, then you have already stepped into the rare air of reliability. And reliable people always rise. Because when life looks for someone to promote, it chooses the one who can be counted on. So today I ask you to reinforce that trust. In the comments below, write, I stand in purpose. I lead with integrity. I trust who I'm becoming. Let that be your declaration. Say it with belief. Type it with clarity. And know this, if you've felt even one of these signs taking root in you, then wealth is not far, it is near. And every step you take with intention draws it even closer. There comes a time in the process of transformation when your identity begins to shift, not just what you do, but who you are. You stop trying to achieve wealth and you start embodying it. You begin thinking like someone who already has it. You speak with calm certainty, not desperate hope. You make decisions from vision, not fear. This is not arrogance, this is internal alignment. When a person begins to operate as if the result is already theirs, not with entitlement, but with readiness, they move from struggle into flow. If you've caught yourself standing taller, speaking clearer, or walking more confidently, not because anything around you has changed, but because something within you has, then you are already living in the vibration of success. You're not waiting for wealth. You're meeting it. Another unmistakable signal that wealth is near. Your standards rise. You no longer tolerate what you once did. You've started choosing quality over quantity. Quality of thoughts, quality of company, quality of execution. You've cleaned your space. You've adjusted your routines. You've tightened your focus. Why? Because you no longer want to simply survive. You want to refine. And refinement is a mark of the wealthy. They don't accept good enough. They strive for mastery, for excellence, for precision. The person who polishes their habits polishes their future. If you've felt more sensitive to disorder, more compelled to raise the bar in how you show up, then you are preparing your house for fortune to walk through the door. Let's talk now about energy. Not hustle, not chaos, but clean, renewable, intentional energy. Have you recently found yourself less drained by tasks that used to exhaust you? Have you begun to feel energized after reading, after building, after working toward your goals? That's a sign. Energy is information. When your spirit feels lifted by your actions, you are aligned. Most people drag their bodies through days that drain them. But those who begin walking in purpose find that their energy replenishes them. You don't burn out from effort, you burn out from misalignment. And when you're aligned, wealth can flow without resistance. The greatest fortunes are built by those who love what they do, and you can only love what aligns with who you really are. Have you stopped chasing every opportunity? That too is a sign. You've grown wise. You now understand that the right path doesn't require constant convincing. You've begun listening to your instincts, sensing which doors to open and which to ignore. This is discernment, and discernment is priceless. Because wealth isn't just about taking chances. It's about knowing which chances are yours. Every wealthy person eventually learns that saying no is more powerful than saying yes. Focus builds fortunes. Clarity builds confidence. And when your intuition sharpens, so does your ability to build with speed and strength. If your gut has become your guide and peace has become your compass, you are moving exactly as you should. Another sign, you've stopped measuring success only by the scoreboard. You've started measuring it by how you feel at night, by the peace you carry, the clarity in your mind, the alignment in your actions. This is not the abandonment of ambition. This is maturity. Because there is no wealth greater than sleeping well. The world is full of people with money who cannot rest. But you've started to value peace. You've started asking, is this path sustainable? Will this still matter in 10 years? Is this building something that lasts? These are the questions of the wealthy. Because wealth is not just about having more, it's about living better. Let us now explore a deeper layer. Forgiveness. A rare signal, but a powerful one. Have you let go of old resentment lately? Have you forgiven someone not for their sake, but for yours? That is healing. And healing creates space. You cannot attract the future while carrying the weight of the past. Forgiveness clears the emotional clutter that blocks your clarity. The person who forgives is no longer tied to what was. They are free to walk into what will be. And the freer you become, the faster life responds. If you've recently felt the peace of release, the calm of closure, or the strength of letting go, then you are lighter. And lightness is speed. Speed is momentum, and momentum brings wealth. Now consider this. Have you become more protective of your inputs? You've stopped consuming nonsense. You've unfollowed noise. You've begun treating your attention like currency. That's no accident. Attention is the seed of creation. Whatever you give it to, grows. And you've begun to give it to vision, to learning, to building. This is why you're changing. Not because you're doing more, but because you're absorbing better. When you guard your gates, your eyes, your ears, your time, you begin transforming by default. The wealthiest people in the world are not just smarter, they're more selective. And if you've become selective, you're already moving into that space. Let's talk now about investment. Not just financial, but mental, emotional, relational. Are you putting in without seeing results yet? Are you still showing up, still planting seeds, still pouring energy into something that hasn't bloomed? That's faith. That's a sign. Wealth always begins underground. The roots grow before the fruit shows. The world may not see your progress, but the universe does. And the one who continues to sow without applause, without proof, will one day harvest in ways that make perfect sense in hindsight. Keep sowing, keep watering, keep showing up. Your wealth is not delayed, it's maturing. One more signal. You've stopped fearing silence. You're no longer filling every gap with noise. You've begun to see silence as sacred. That's the space where clarity speaks. That's where the next idea is born. The person who can sit in silence is the person who can hear their future. And if you've begun turning off distractions just to think, just to be, just to hear, then wealth is already in the room. Because clarity always precedes strategy, and silence sharpens clarity like nothing else. So let's close today's part with a declaration, one that affirms the calm power of your transformation. Type this in the comments. I move in alignment. I walk in clarity. I am a channel for growth. Let the words be your agreement with your future. Speak them, believe them, live them. Because if you've felt even a few of these shifts lately, then you are no longer on the path. You are becoming the path. There comes a point in every journey where what used to feel far suddenly feels close. Not because the destination changed, but because you did. The questions that once paralyzed you are now answered in seconds. The decisions that used to drain you are now made with peace. This is not magic. This is mastery. And mastery always begins with repetition. If you felt this shift, this subtle but profound acceleration, know this: you are not imagining it. You've crossed an invisible line. The line between wishing and walking, between hoping and having. And from this point forward, the game changes. You are no longer chasing wealth. You are calibrating to it. You are tuning yourself like an instrument to match the frequency of the life you were born to live. The first sign of this calibration is detachment from the outcome. You no longer beg, you no longer plead, you expect, not with arrogance but with alignment. You say, "I've planted the seeds. The harvest is inevitable." That's power. That's wealth consciousness. And in that state, you don't need external confirmation to keep going. You move because motion itself is now your default. You no longer need proof to proceed. That is when the external world begins to catch up to the internal decision. Most people move only when they see, but the ones who succeed move when they know. They understand that seeing is the result of knowing, not the requirement for it. And so you've begun living from the result. You act as if it's already true, not because you're lying to yourself, but because you understand how the mind works. The mind does not respond to the truth. It responds to the dominant signal. If the dominant signal is fear, your mind creates more reasons to be afraid. But if the dominant signal is faith, your mind begins rearranging your behavior, your posture, your tone of voice, your presence, and eventually the world adjusts to match it. Every wealthy person knows this truth. Whether they speak it or not, the world bends to certainty. It yields to those who no longer ask for permission to be who they are. Let's talk about environment. Have you changed yours? Have you cleaned the clutter? Reorganized your workspace? Reduced your time with those who drain you? That's no small thing. That's a signal. Wealth doesn't grow in chaos. Prosperity doesn't visit the mind that is constantly scattered. When you tidy your physical world, you are telling your subconscious that you are ready. You are preparing the space, you are building the temple. And if you've felt that urge lately to clean, to refine, to upgrade, it's because your outer world is catching up with the signal of your inner world. That's a beautiful thing. That's proof of alignment. Here's another signal. You've stopped competing. You no longer care what the others are doing. You've stopped measuring your progress against someone else's path. Why? Because comparison weakens creation. The moment you stop building for others' approval, you begin building something real. Something you. The wealthiest minds are not distracted by competition, they're consumed by their craft. They build because building is who they are. And when you enter that state, you are no longer concerned with pace or placement. You know that wealth will find you, not because you rushed, but because you refined. Let's go deeper. Have you begun speaking differently? Have your words become more focused, more deliberate, more powerful? That's not an accident. That's your identity shifting. The tongue always follows the belief. And your belief has changed. You no longer say, "I hope." You say, "I am." You no longer say, "someday." You say, "soon." You speak as a builder, as a creator. And your words, your declared intentions, are carving paths into the invisible, making room for the tangible. This is what Scripture means when it says, "The power of life and death is in the tongue." Speak as though it is, because in time it will be. You've also likely noticed your emotional patterns changing. You no longer spiral when things don't go your way. You pause, you reflect, you adjust. That's emotional wealth. The ability to regulate your state is more valuable than any number in your bank account, because the calm mind builds where the frantic mind breaks. And when you become the kind of person who can remain steady, you become the kind of person who can handle more. And wealth always flows to those who can handle more. More pressure, more responsibility, more opportunity. If you found yourself becoming harder to offend, quicker to forgive, slower to react, then you are already wealthy, and the numbers will soon reflect it. Let me give you a simple but transformative practice. Each night before bed, ask yourself, did I live today like a wealthy man? Did I think, speak, act, and move like someone who already has what I've been asking for? If the answer is yes, sleep in peace. If the answer is no, adjust tomorrow. But don't skip this question. It will realign your path more than any book, podcast, or motivational quote, because it brings you back to the root. And the root is this: wealth is not something you chase, it is something you match, and the match is made in the day-to-day. If this message has struck a chord in you, if you've recognized even a fraction of this shift in your life, then declare it now. Write it in the comments. I am the signal. I move as if it's already mine. Let this not just be another phrase, but a reflection of who you are becoming. Because when you live as the signal, life has no choice but to respond. You don't need to chase. You need to transmit. And right now you're already doing it. You've made it here because something in you refused to settle. You didn't stop at the surface. You didn't turn away when the truth asked something of you. Instead, you stayed. You listened. And in doing so, you've done what only a small fraction of people ever do. You've chosen awareness over comfort. That choice, though invisible to others, marks the beginning of a new life. Because awareness, once activated, cannot be undone. You can never again pretend you don't know the truth. You can no longer go back to blind conformity, to reactive living, to waiting for permission to rise. No. From this moment on, you have seen too much, felt too much, known too much to return to who you once were, and that is a gift. The beginning of wealth is not money, it is awakening. Now that you are awake, what will you do? This is where most people hesitate. They treat insight like entertainment. They enjoy the spark, the rush, the emotional high, but never translate it into motion. But you are different. You've heard the laws, you've studied the patterns, you've seen how momentum, identity, planting, service, and inner calibration form the blueprint for riches. The only question left is whether you will act from that blueprint consistently or return to the randomness that ruled your past. Because make no mistake, wealth is not built by knowledge, it is built by alignment. Knowledge without action is potential, but action aligned with truth is power, real, unstoppable, undeniable power. You now understand that the harvest you desire is already on its way. Your only job is to continue the behaviors that allowed it to begin. Not just for a week, not just for a season, but until it becomes who you are. That means choosing to speak power when fear rises, choosing to serve when excuses whisper, choosing to show up when no one's watching. This is the quiet work, the hidden discipline, the process few applaud but all must walk. It is the doorway to a life of peace, purpose, and financial freedom. And you right now are standing in that doorway. All you have to do is step through. And so I'll ask you now, quietly, sincerely, will you continue? Will you commit not to hype but to mastery? Not to outcomes but to alignment? Because if you do, the world will meet you at that frequency. Ideas will come, people will show up, opportunities will align, not because of chance but because you became magnetic. You won't need to chase, you'll attract, you won't need to beg, you'll command, not with arrogance but with certainty, because the man or woman who walks in truth cannot be denied. They move with the authority of someone who has become their vision, and that is what you are now doing. Let me leave you with one final law, and I ask that you do more than just hear it. I ask that you live it. The law is this: what you do in silence decides what the world sees in public. If you are not where you want to be, the answer is not in louder action, it's in deeper consistency. How you speak to yourself, how you treat your work, how you shape your days behind closed doors. That is where legacy begins. You don't need the spotlight. You need the structure, the rhythm, the quiet discipline of a person who has nothing to prove but everything to become. And when that becomes your standard, the world will have no choice but to rise and reflect it. You are no longer the same person who pressed play at the beginning of this message. The shift has already happened. Maybe it was gradual, maybe it was subtle, but it was real. And from now on, you are not waiting for a better life. You are building one with your thoughts, with your choices, with the way you carry yourself when no one is watching. That is wealth. Not loud, not desperate, not performative, but quiet, grounded, unshakable. The kind that lasts, not just a season, but a lifetime, because it was forged in principle. If this series has impacted you, if it reminded you of who you really are beneath the noise and doubt, then make that impact ripple. Like, share, and comment below so others find this message when they need it most. And don't just write any words, write the words that reflect your new standard. I don't chase, I align, I build, I attract. Let that be your declaration, your conclusion, and your beginning. Because it doesn't end here. It begins every time you listen again, every time you take another step, every time you choose principle over panic. You are already becoming the wealth you once hoped for. And when the results come, when the income increases, when the life begins to reflect what you've planted, remember this. It was never luck, it was never chance, it was law. You aligned, you moved, you believed, you repeated. And the universe, true to its promise, returned the signal in multiplied form. That is the reward of the few, the reality of those who walk in truth, and the destiny of those who finish what they start.